A Melbourne, Australia television reporter said his crew filmed UFOs for 7 minutes Saturday night over the eastern region of New Zealand's South Island.
On the 21st of December 1978, cargo plane pilots John Randall and Keith Hine observed strange light phenomena over the sea near the South Island of New Zealand. The objects were also picked up by Wellington Air Traffic Control radar, and reports reached local media. 10 days later, on the 31st of December, producers at Australia's Channel 10 dispatched reporter Quentin Fogarty with a camera crew to attempt to find the same UFOs along the same flight path. And they did.
Air traffic controllers were recording strange blips on their radar. Here is what reporter Quentin Fogarty said as he traced an airline flight that reported seeing UFOs last month.
We're now in the radar room at Christchurch Airport. It's about 1:45, and in about another 20 minutes we intend to take off again in the Argosy and retrace the route we took only a few moments earlier. We've just heard from Wellington radar that there are still targets in the Kaikoura area. So this time we're hoping to get better film than we did last time, and all I can say is we'll see what happens.
The New Zealand case is of considerable importance in the history of ufology because of the residue of information that's available afterwards. We have the film itself and the tape recordings made by Quentin Fogarty on the aircraft, and of prime importance is we have the tape recording made by the Wellington Air Traffic Control Center, and it provides a history of the sighting minute by minute.
We're about now 3 minutes out of Christchurch Airport, and on our starboard side we can see two very bright lights, one much brighter than the other. It is like a very, very bright star, and just below it is another light, not quite so bright.
Just before midnight, Fogarty went airborne with cargo pilot Bill Startup. The beginning of the flight was uneventful. Then at 12:05, Fogarty and the crew saw strange lights and objects coming towards them from the right side of the plane. Fogarty turned on his camera and they began filming.
Those two lights appear to be travelling with us. They're still off the starboard wing. The brighter light is still above the other, and it's moved a little further ahead of the other. It's extremely bright, much brighter than any of the other stars in the sky.
Ground radar observed the objects, and the control tower confirmed the sighting and recorded the conversation. What follows is the actual audio of this unusually well-documented event.
The storm target showing at 11 o'clock at 3 miles. Just left at 9 o'clock at about 2 miles.
Captain Startup said that the object or target was initially ahead of him, then traveled at an unbelievable speed past his left side. He quickly banked the plane left in an attempt to make visual contact. From the ground, Wellington Air Traffic radioed a chilling message to the captain. They had picked up yet another target on his left side, and this one was closing in on the plane.
Target is 12 o'clock at 3 miles.
I'm now looking over towards the right of the aircraft, and we have an object confirmed by Wellington radar. It's been following us for quite a while. It's about 4 miles away, and it looks like a very faint star, but then it emits a very bright white and green light.
Captain Startup was able to get close enough to determine that the object had an array of bright blue lights pulsing at a rapid rate. To his shock, the object had increased in size.
There was an interesting radar event where the some object got so close to the aircraft that looked to Wellington radar as if the aircraft radar target image had doubled in size.
Strong target, right in formation with you now. Your target has doubled in size.
The double-sized target continued to appear on radar screens for 36 seconds, then returned to its original size.
Blue lights right there. This is the object which was apparently traveling along with the aircraft. It was picked up on aircraft radar.
Dr. Bruce Maccabee received a 16mm copy of the Argosy UFO film directly from the Australian television network in 1979.
Roll 4, take 10.
The complete and unedited film has never been made available before. Experts believe that these images are the most comprehensive and frightening UFO evidence ever captured on film.
This is the famous New Zealand film obtained the night of December 31st, 1978. The cameraman is sitting in the seat between the pilot and the co-pilot. The image is dancing around because he was carrying it on his shoulder. They saw this light to their right. And this light, as time goes on, will fade in and out, takes on various shapes. This is the flashing light that you have to slow down and look at frame by frame to see what happens. When it goes from very bright white down to dim orange, you can see the image went over to the side, then he turned the camera a little bit in order to pull it back into the center.
That other target that has been following us has now been joined by two others, so we now, at this stage, have three unidentified flying objects just off our right wing, and they've been following us, or one of them's been following us now for probably about 10 minutes. I, for one, am hoping really that we've seen enough tonight and the rest of our journey back to Berlin will be uneventful. I think I've just about had enough of UFOs for one night.
And that's the way it is. Or is it? Monday, January 1st, 1979. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Big question, especially for Christians, is this. Are UFOs for real? In a manner of speaking, yes. One cannot deny either the numerous sightings or the miles of video presented by normally competent professional people. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. Whether or not a UFO is from outer space is another question entirely. I find it particularly interesting that this latest crop of UFO stories paints them as benevolent guardians. I believe UFOs are real and that their source is supernatural, but not from some distant galaxy as usually presumed. The Bible speaks of fallen angels or demons that have great powers. It reveals that apart from divine restraint, they can manifest themselves in a human form and materialize advanced vehicles. Prophecy predicts that God's restraint of those malevolent people will be removed in the last days. Just imagine what would happen if a UFO were to suddenly land in New York and demand to be taken to see the UN ambassador to outer space aliens. Actually, you don't have to imagine. That's the plot line for dozens, if not scores, of past movies and television series. Aliens arrive promising such things to mankind as the elimination of war, removal of poverty, the cure for dreaded diseases, and techniques that will make it possible to feed billions of people. In many of these movies, mankind embraces their newfound benefactors only to discover that what the aliens were really doing was fattening us up for lunch. But what if those aliens are really what the Bible calls demons? The Bible records incidences of fallen angels assuming visible physical bodies and interacting with mankind. This is especially true before the Great Flood, recorded in Genesis chapter 6. Bible prophecy predicts a great deception that God will send to those who are left behind after the rapture, that is, all Christians are removed from the earth. This deception will cause the vast majority of the inhabited earth to follow the Antichrist as the world leader and savior. According to these prophecies in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 7 through 12, and Revelation chapter 13, this great deception will mold the world into an Antichrist-worshiping one-world government over
you took the whip, you drove around everywhere.
With the exception of those who are healed of their spiritual blindness and come to faith in Christ after the rapture. But these are terribly, terribly fearful times, and it's important for us who know the Lord to focus on how Jesus left us about the times we have entered where His coming is imminent. He said, "Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many dwelling places or mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And he said, we know the way. One of his apostles, Thomas, said, how do we know the way? And he said, have I been so long with you and you've not come to know me? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to God except through me. And it's so important. If you're listening to this, you're unsure of where you are with God right now. Receive the gift of pardon that Jesus Christ died in your place to purchase for you. He offers it to you. He says, whoever believes in me shall not perish, but have everlasting life. You can pray right now and change your eternal destiny. These are fearful times. Don't put that off. Your eternal destiny is at stake. Just pray right now and ask Jesus Christ to come into your life and give you the pardon for your sins that he died to pay for.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. And thank you, Steve, for the invitation. My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23 and a half years as a Member of Parliament. Although as Minister of National Defence, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Defence Force. And that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. He sent me a copy of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what was contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accepted the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort, Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally. Since then, I've learned a lot from many sources, including a number of the fantastic witnesses that we have heard these last 4 days. They were so outstanding, I was just really blown away with them, the amount of information that was available. And I appreciate every single one of them. But because I'm not a ufologist, I'm a politician, there are only a few things that I want to add in that particular realm. First is that about in the 1960s sometime, there was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe. And the Commander-in-Chief of the Supreme Allied Headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, or maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. Obviously, they had thought maybe they were Russian and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, an investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And this is my own view at this stage as well. So, except for that, there are just a couple of things that we've talked about that I'd like to refer to. And one was that we were referring to them as they until this morning when Linda Moulton Howe, I think she was the first one, actually named 3 different species. I have brought my latest book called Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, as an aide-memoir, and I name 5 different species here. I'm aware of more now. As a matter of fact, I saw a document just a few days ago that mentioned 20. And I think you, Mr. Chairman, were interested in some of the places they might come from. And I have in here Zeta reticuli, R-E-T-I-C-U-L-I, reticuli, the Pleiades, Orion, Andromeda, and the Altair star systems. So I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart. One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs in Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality. There are 4 different versions, but Paula says that Millennial Hospitality number 2 is the best. I think that's the one I read, and it's a very interesting read if you want to sort of get inside the problem of what it's like to bump into these people floating across the terrain in the desert. Well, enough on that for now. My interest is in full disclosure. And my only caveat is I think probably I would say 95 to 98% full disclosure. I know of 1 or 2 things that I'm not sure should be in the public domain, at least yet. They will be someday, I'm sure, but not maybe immediately. But just as children survive the idea of the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus when they become adult, I think that tax-paying citizens are quite capable of accepting the new and broader reality that we live in a cosmos teeming with life of various sorts. The fact that some other civilizations are more advanced than we are may be humbling, but that could be a necessary step in our survival.
What you're seeing here has nothing to do with little green men from Mars, I assure you. Nothing to do with aliens What you're looking at is the Vril 7. Matter of fact, we went over and got not only the V-2 the rockets, you know about all that, but we also got this technology right here, and we brought it back. Hitler had a whole series of these Vril saucers made. Now, this thing couldn't even leave Earth's atmosphere. It was not a flying saucer like you're thinking about. No little green men involved. We're talking about pure German science here, okay? And it really was just a different form of a helicopter. It still operated off aerodynamic lift, off blades that were run by 12 motors. Our people discovered much of these technological advances when we went in under Operation Paperclip. We went in and began to bring their scientists out. Even before the end of the war, we sent in people and began to make arrangements to recruit their scientists and their intelligence establishments. Hitler's intelligence establishment, almost intact, was brought out of Germany by the Dulles brothers, Henry Kissinger, and other men who worked on that project to get those people out of there. And those people, the Galenord, was eventually turned into your CIA. You people have no concept that half of the CIA was Nazis and the other half was these stool groups like the Skull and Bone groups that Bush came out of.
Poquito, arriba.
8, 9, 10, 11, contando toda la cola. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11.
Ok, no sabemos qué estamos viendo, son unos objetos nada más luminosos que vienen a la misma altura que nosotros. Pues no podemos saber qué están.
And so Hitler believed he was receiving instructions from these ascended masters. And these 300 Tibetan priests were doing channeling between Hitler and Tibet using Tibetan tarot cards, and they were leaving their bodies, they were doing astral projection, they were just doing all kinds of different things. The ascended masters are those demigods, those people who have evolved past humanity. And they've evolved so far out there that they're no longer operating in this plane. They're just out there. They operate on a whole new level, a whole plane of existence that we haven't evolved to yet, okay?
She said, they are Pleiadians, and they have brought you here to do something. And you are ultimately going to be a emissary, was the word. An emissary for them. They're going to channel through you. They're going to use you, and they will speak through you.
So 20 minutes been used as a channel. So they, again, the Spirit entered into him, and the Spirit said he was a Spirit counselor that could give him the information that he was looking for. So I said to George, he was sitting next to me, he said, "Isn't it amazing?" He said, "If you think that's amazing, wait," he says, "until the spirits impersonate one of the departed people that you know, personally, like an uncle or a brother or a sister or something like that." He says, "That is unique."
At first, when I first saw these things, I thought it was a hologram. But the light reflecting off of these, emanating from these objects, reflected on the clouds above them. At this point, I, today, do not know what it was, in fact, that we saw. But when we got back to the hotel, the motel that night, Paul said that he, about a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that, after he fell asleep, he woke up totally awake, and something picked him up, actually picked him up and set him up in bed. involuntarily. And the moment he sat up, a light came on over his head like a little dim night light. And he looked up to see an alien's face with the typical alien's face with the bubble eyes, but it was glowing, and you could see through it. You could see the ceiling through it, as if it were a hologram of some kind.
But it was glowing, and you could see through it. You could see the ceiling through it, as if it were a hologram of some kind.
In fact, Hynek, even more interestingly, was a government researcher for the US government under a project called Blue Book. The US government has investigated UFOs for over 40 years in different projects. And he found that, you know, the majority could be explained naturally or as either man-made phenomena, but he said there was a mysterious element that defied naturalistic explanation. These craft have been seen to change shapes. They defy the laws of physics. You know, American fighter pilots have gone up, seen these balls of light and shot at them, and they've disappeared before their eyes. They've disappeared off radar screens.
Heineken, is his name?
Hynek
recognized that what they were seeing was very likely not a nuts and bolts physical object. Okay.
Yeah. People that claim these abduction experiences say that little grey entities enter their room in the middle of the night and they see them pass through the walls.
I'm going to introduce a man who says there are more things between heaven and hell than any of us have accepted. And I have the witnesses and the documents to prove it. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Stephen Graham.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns. That they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States. That extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years.
Okay, I've been through 3,000 pictures now, and I must say this finding here is the most staggering one. But as I say, his presence is everywhere on the planet. Everywhere. Here we got the Free again. Here we got the Beast. Aliens, and those depictions you find on the moon too. You find all these things. The cube system, Celtic cross, CERN, yeah, part of Lucifer, and this is something brand new. This is also Luciferian, that is Luciferian, all of it is everywhere. You just need to open your eyes. Everything you find here on planet Earth, you find on the moon. All you see here, you find on the moon. I'm not kidding you. These things you find up there. And I don't believe in coincidences. There is no such thing. No, he influenced humanity in a bad way. He was sent off, but he's still here. He came back. He's still around. and his energy has intoxicated the entire planet with greed and want more and even more. And the biggest church symbolizes themselves as an antichrist. Jesus says to his Father, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." Meaning of that word is his presence, his power, his energy, his negative force has influenced the entire world. He's everywhere. It is up to you to fight against that. Take on the full armor of God and fight against that in the spirit. Because these beings, we don't stand a chance. If you want to take up an AR rifle and want to do something to those people, beings, forget it. Your rifle won't even fire. You get on your knees and you pray. That's your only salvation. This fellow here, he means business. He is everywhere. And he has deceived the world. Everybody believes that this so-called Vatican is for Christ. No, they're not. They work for Lucifer. That's simple. The snake symbol is many times on the moon. See the all-seeing eye in a mosque? You see, the Vatican invented Islam in order to make sure of future wars against Christians, because the Christians didn't want to go along with the Roman Catholic Church. And we know who the Roman Catholic Church is. That's what you're looking at now. The all-seeing eye. That thing there. That is your enemy. Only through prayers. God bless you. Okay, I've been through 3,000 pictures now, and I must say this finding here is the most stunning. But as I say, his presence is everywhere. Everywhere. Here we got the tree again. And we got the beast. Aliens, and those depictions you find on the moon too. You find all these things. Cube system, Celtic cross, sun, out of Lucifer, and this is a this is also Luciferian, that is Luciferian, all of it is everywhere. Everything you find on planet Earth, you find all these things you find on it. I'm not kidding. These things you find on it. I don't believe in coincidence. There is no such thing. He influenced humanity in that way. He was sent off, but he still came back. Still and his energy has intoxicated the entire planet with greed and even more. And the biggest church symbolizes himself as an antichrist. Jesus says to his Father, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." Meaning of that word is his presence, his power, his energy, his negative force has influenced the entire world. He's everywhere. It is up to you to fight against that. Take on the full armor of God and fight against them in the spirit. Because these beings, you don't stand a chance. If you want to take up an AR rifle and want to do something to those people, the beings, forget it. Your rifle won't even fire. You get on your knees and you pray. That's your only salvation. This fellow here, in this business, he is everyone. And he has deceived everybody believes that this so-called Vatican is for Christ. That's simple. The snake symbol is many times. See the all-seeing eye in a mosque. See, the Vatican invented Islam. The order to make sure of future wars against Christians. Because the Christians didn't want to go along with the Roman Catholic Church. And you know who the Roman Catholic Church is. The all-seeing eye. Only through prayers. God bless you.
Well, you know, we're told in Matthew 24, verses 21, it says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been seen since the beginning of the world until this time, nor shall ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved.
Bingo.
But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened." And I that probably does take us into the Great Tribulation, perhaps that second half of the 7-year tribulation period. But what I want to suggest to you, because this dovetails back into the UFO, the aliens' infatuation, it's probably not a good word for our nuclear capabilities. If what you're suggesting is correct, that when the Middle East war explodes, be it Psalm 83, which would be my advocation, which would probably be precede Ezekiel 38, but whether it's that or Ezekiel 38, if the UFOs disclosure, full disclosure, the aliens comes at that time, it might tie into the thought that they are at this point concerned that humanity might try to destroy itself.
Right.
And of course it says that those days will be shortened for the elect's sake, so we know that God will shorten those days. It won't be the UFO, the extraterrestrials.
Right.
But it might suggest that maybe that they feel that is the time that they've got to come on the scene before humanity actually destroys itself. And even prophecy says there will come a point where mankind could destroy itself, as I just quoted.
Well, I think that we are living in the days where we're going to see all this. This stuff, again, it's real, and the church is starting to wake up at the fact that this thing is not going away. And, you know, I played golf with my friend a couple of Fridays ago, and I actually blogged about this. And we hooked up with this guy, nice guy, and we played, you know, we turned the corner on the 9th hole, went to the 10th hole, and on the 11th hole he announces that he's a pastor. Well, you know, why didn't you tell us that in the beginning? You know, I mean, it's like, you know, what are you trying to do here? You know, so anyway, you know, it's like undercover pastor. So I said, well, I am too. And we got into a conversation. What do you do? I write books, and this is what I do. And the moment I said Nephilim, he said, well, you don't believe it, that fallen angels had sex with the women. I said, absolutely. He said, that never happened. That can't happen. That's impossible. He starts quoting scripture to me. And I realized that here's a guy that's been pastor of a church probably for 20 years, and he's a grand poobah, and everybody kisses this guy's ring. And I mean this with all due respect. And he went to a certain seminary, and he learned a certain thing. And I looked at him and I said, have you ever done a modicum of research on the subject? Do you have any idea what you're talking about here? That in the days of Noah, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. What differentiates the days of Noah that Matthew 24 states? And people are always saying, well, who are the sons of God? That's the $64,000 question. The Hebrew term is B'nai Elohim. And Chuck Missler has done a great expose of that, as well as Dr. Thomas, M.D. DeHaan, the countless people. Pember have looked at this passage, and it is B'nai Elohim, and it always is angels. That's what it is. It is not the ungodly line of Cain. marrying the daughters of Seth. That is a total torture of the text. But if you're taught that in seminary, and that's what you believe, because what it does, and then of course he gives me the classic one, we're told we'll be like angels, we're not given in marriage. Okay, what does that have to do with our sex organs? Nothing. No one ever says that that they're sexless. In fact, what we actually see in the book of Jude is what? The angels left their first estate and went after strange flesh. Thank you very much. It all fits together. And the moment we understand that the fallen angels did this, and also afterwards, which is when Joshua and Caleb go into the promised land, and who was in there again? The Nephilim. And what are they doing? They were giants. We're like grasshoppers in their sights. Why do you think the decree from the Most High God is to slay everybody in Jericho? They're hybrids. They're demonic fallen angel hybrids. That's why the decree. Otherwise, you do have a genocidal, homicidal, maniacal God.
Right, right.
You do. But if you don't know the Nephilim stuff, you look at that and you go, "This is the God I'm following. He's crazy. He's a homicidal maniac. Kill everybody, burn everything. The men, women, children, everything goes. Burn everything. Goats, animals, everything. Why? It's all tainted, genetically messed with by the fallen angel."